Hello again and welcome back to our course on Excel 2013. In this section I'm going to take a look at fill, and in particular take a look at a new feature of Excel 2013 which is called flash fill. But let's start with the basic fill facility first. Even on the basis of what you've seen so far, you'll realize by now that you have a lot of data with Excel, and very often the data is there to help to categorize or form headings for other data. You have data related to dates and times, sizes, lengths, all sorts of numerical data in particular. And very often you need to establish headings or categories where there is a distinct pattern. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose that you were doing a company's accounts for the last year. You could probably realize, even if you don't do a lot of accountancy work yourself, that you probably need to put all the months of the last year into columns or rows on a worksheet. One of the features of Excel, which is one of its great strengths, is the ability to fill in similar values in cells. I'm going to show you a very straightforward example of that now. Let's suppose that in this empty workbook I type in the cell B2, I'm just going to type January. Now if I hover over that little black square in the corner of the selection rectangle around B2, the one we mentioned before, it's actually called the fill handle. Let me pull it now. I'm using the fill handle and I've pulled the cell right out to column M. Now I'm going to release it, and look what Excel does for me. It looks at what I've put in B2. It says January. It recognizes January as a month of the year, and as I fill to the right, it fills in the other months. Now that may or may not be what I wanted to do, and I'll come back to that question in a moment, but very often it is what I want to do. And very often that's really helpful because it avoids the need for me to go through and type in all of those month names. Now Excel is certainly not restricted to dealing with months, and there are various sorts of fill that you can use. Let's try a different one. I've selected cell B4, typing a 1 in there. B5, type a 2 in there. Select both cells. Pull the handle down, the fill handle. Now as I pull, if you look to the right of where the cursor is, you'll see Excel is almost thinking out loud in a way. There it's saying that's 6, that's 7, 8, 9. It's showing me what it's thinking as it goes through, and when I go down to here and release, I can see that it's managed to fill in what I'm going to refer to as a series here. So it's intelligently, from the fact that I put a 1 in first and then a 2, Excel looks at what I've done and assumes how I want the series to continue. So as I do the fill in there, it just carries on the same pattern. It says, well, 1, 2, so the next one must be 3, the next one must be 4, and so on. Now it doesn't have to be a sequence just like that. So let me just undo that, go back to when I just had those two cells, and I'm going to change the value in 2 to 4. Select the two cells again. It's very important that I select them both so that Excel can see the pattern, starting at 1, then going to 4. Now watch what happens as I fill down. Now it realizes I want to count up in 3s, so it's absolutely fine. It's happy with counting up in 3s, and that's exactly what it does. Now we could apply the same principle over here to the months. Say if I wanted to count up in months, but there is actually a much more flexible way of doing that. Now what we've done in both of these examples is to create a series using the fill handle and a starting point. In the first one we used the starting point of January, and what Excel 2013 did by default was to assume if it sees the word January that we're talking about working in months, and then when we did the numerical one here, it only needed the first two cells, the 1 and the 4, to work out what the series of numbers was. Now you can certainly fill in and create series in that way, but there's another way of doing it as well. And let me show you how the other way works. Let's suppose that I select cell D4 and I type in there the first of March 2013 in that format. Now, if I wanted to create a similar kind of series to the one we've got up there, and I'm going to do it this time as a column, and I wanted to make each value, each cell, 3 months more than the previous one, then I can do it in this way. If you look at the Home tab in the editing group, on the left there's 3 buttons, and the middle one is called the Fill button. Click on the drop down, and one of the options on the drop down is Series. Now if I click on Series, it will let me choose everything I need to choose about this series. It says, first of all, do you want to go in rows or do you want to go in columns? Well, I'm going to go in columns. What type of data is it? Is it straightforward linear data, growth data, date data, autofill data? Now this is date data. We're dealing with dates. Now what is the date unit? Now the date unit I'm going to use on this occasion is the month. And the step value, I'm not going to go up in steps of 1 month, I'm going to go up in steps of 3 months. And I can specify a stop value or not as I want to. Now supposing I decided my stop value was going to be the 31st of December 2016. Click on OK. Let's see what Excel does. And what it does is it gives us a series going up in 3-month increments, the first of each month, 3-month intervals, until it gets to the last value it can before my stop value. Now I set a stop value of the 31st of December 2016. It got to the first, and then it decided that the next one would be beyond my stop value, so it stopped at the 1st of December 2016. So that's a completely different way of achieving the same effect. This facility can be very flexible, and very often it's quicker to use that series dialog than to use the fill alone. Let me show you a slightly more complicated example. Let's suppose I wanted to start a date series on the 1st of March 2013, as I've got here, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the series dialog. I'm going to this time go in rows, still date type, but this time instead of going up a month at a time, I'm going to specify to go up in intervals of say 27 days at a time, which is a very strange interval, but there you are. Just to demonstrate that you can pretty much have any combination you like. So if I go up in 27-day intervals and say stop on the 20th of February 2015, click on OK. Now bear in mind the series of hashes there is just because the columns are too narrow. I'll show you how to deal with that properly later on, and you can see I'm going up in 27-day intervals. So it's a really flexible way of filling in regular patterns of numbers and dates, in particular in Excel 2013. Now I've got a couple of other very important things to show you in relation to fill and series. I'm going to clear this particular worksheet. Now of course I could just close this without saving changes and create a new one, but if you wanted to clear everything on a worksheet without closing it, there's a very good way of doing that. If you look in the top left hand corner to the top and left of cell A1, there's a little sort of icon there. If you click that, what happens is you select all the cells on a worksheet, every single one of them. If you then press the delete key, you've cleared everything. Now to be fair, it's a little bit more complicated than that because there's something going on under the hood that I haven't mentioned yet, and I'll come back to that later if there's time. But for the moment, think of that as clearing everything. And let's now look at fill one more time. Let me put a 3 in there and a 4 in there, and let me select those 2 cells. Now when you're doing fill, you don't necessarily fill down or to the right. You can also fill to the left. In which case, of course, in this case, it will fill numerically downwards. So you go 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, minus 1, minus 2. Let's undo that. You could fill upwards. What do you think would happen if we fill upwards? Well, in an upwards direction, we only have one number in that cell, G10. So given that we've only got one number in G10, a 4, when you fill up, you just get another 4 in every cell. Similarly, the 3s, a 3 in every cell. That should enable you to work out what happens if I fill down. Pretty much the same thing. Undo that. And then if I fill right, obviously the numbers will go up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, because starting with a selection of two cells, 3 and 4, which I had, it will assume that I want to continue going up in this linear series one at a time. What if I just selected the 4 and went right? What do you think would happen? That's right, you just get 4 because I've only given it a 4 to start with. There is no sense of the numbers going up and down, there's no increment, it just fills in the same thing. Now sometimes you want it to fill in the same thing, you want the same content in every cell, and that's how you achieve it. Now when it comes to filling in the same contents everywhere, say you want the same heading, the same date, some other numeric or text value that you want the same everywhere. So for instance, if I had the word hello in this cell, if all you want to do is to have hello across all of those cells, then you don't need to use the fill handle. You can select the cells you want, make sure that the first one has got in it the value that you want to copy effectively, and then on this drop down you can say fill right and you'll get the same value throughout. Similarly, if you selected all of those and did fill down, you'd get everything filled all the way down as well. So instead of using the fill handle, you can use the drop down menu there on the home tab in the editing group. On the fill button, the drop down there lets you fill down, right, up and left without doing a series. So there we are, that's the basic use of fill. In the next section we're going to look at the new aspect of fill, the new fill feature, which really is a very strong, very powerful feature which is introduced in Excel 2013, and it's called Flash Fill. So please join me for that.